"The new company truck is yours," my dad smiled, handing it to my brother as an engagement gift. I gave my 2 weeks' notice. 3 months later, they were desperate. After 15 years of building my father's plumbing company into a successful business, I watched him hand the keys to my company truck to my younger brother as an engagement present. That was the moment I knew I'd never be valued, no matter what I did. I'm Alex, 35 years old, and until recently I was the backbone of Wilson Family Plumbing. When most of my friends headed off to college, I stayed behind to help Dad expand the business. I learned everything from the ground up: unclogging stubborn drains, fixing leaky pipes, installing complex systems, dealing with irate customers at 2 a.m. during winter emergencies. I became the business while my father, Earl, gradually stepped back into a management role. Dad started with just a van and a toolbox in his garage. Now we have, or rather they have, 8 trucks and 12 employees. That growth wasn't magic or luck. It was thousands of hours of my sweat, sacrificed weekends, and meticulous attention to building our reputation in the community. Every positive review, every repeat customer, every referral. I had personally ensured their satisfaction. My younger brother Travis joined 5 years ago. At 28, he still acts like a teenager who's forced to work in the family store. He's chronically late, takes extended lunches, and leaves jobs half-finished. The number of customer complaints I've had to smooth over after his visits is staggering. While I'm on call 24/7 for emergencies, Travis forgets his phone on weekends. Somehow, Dad always has an excuse ready. He's still learning the ropes, or not everyone has your natural talent, Alex. The warning signs were always there. When I trained new hires, they'd often get promoted above me. When I implemented a new scheduling system that improved our efficiency by 30%, Travis got the credit at our company meeting because he supported the initiative. When I suggested expanding into commercial contracts, Dad dismissed it as too risky, only to praise Travis's innovative thinking when he suggested the same thing 6 months later. The financial disparities became impossible to ignore. Dad had promised me partnership for years, dangling ownership stakes that never materialized. Meanwhile, I discovered Travis was making $15,000 more annually despite having fewer responsibilities and less experience. I was driving a 2010 truck with 180,000 miles on it, while Dad and Travis cruised around in vehicles less than 3 years old. I told myself that loyalty mattered, that family comes first, that Dad would eventually recognize my contributions. I was wrong on all counts. My truck had been breaking down regularly for months. The transmission was slipping, the suspension was shot, and the cargo area had developed rust holes that let in water during rainstorms, damaging expensive equipment. After a particularly bad breakdown that cost us a major client, Dad finally agreed we needed a new vehicle. That night, as I was assessing the damage to my old truck, Dad came out to the garage with 2 beers in hand. He passed one to me and leaned against the workbench. For a moment, it felt like the old days before Travis joined the company, when Dad and I would troubleshoot problems together. "Remember when I taught you how to change the belt on the old Ford?" he asked, a rare smile softening his weathered face. "You couldn't have been more than 12. I nodded, the memory washing over me. "You let me do the whole job while you supervised, told me I had the steadiest hands you'd ever seen on a kid." "Never seen anyone take to plumbing like you did, Alex. Natural talent." He took a long sip of his beer, looking at the truck rather than at me. "This business, it wouldn't be what it is without you." For that brief moment, I felt appreciated, connected to him like I rarely did anymore. He clapped me on the shoulder before heading back inside, leaving me to wonder why these moments of recognition had become so rare. Why couldn't he acknowledge my value when it actually mattered, in business decisions, in pay, in front of Travis? I spent weeks researching options, balancing fuel efficiency with cargo capacity, finding the best deals, preparing all the purchase paperwork. I even arranged financing through our longtime bank. The truck would serve as my mobile office for the next decade, so I wanted to get it right. That Sunday, Dad invited us all for dinner. Travis brought his girlfriend Jessica, recently engaged after dating for just 8 months. Mom prepared a feast, and Dad seemed unusually cheerful. After dessert, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. My heart lifted, thinking he was finally going to acknowledge my hard work or announce the partnership we discussed. Instead, he pulled out a set of keys attached to a silver keychain with the company logo. With the biggest smile I'd seen in years, he handed them to Travis. "To help you start your new life, son. The new company truck is yours. I had them add all the upgrades you wanted. Consider it an engagement present from your mother and me." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Travis grinned smugly while Jessica clapped her hands in delight. They hadn't even noticed my expression. My mother busied herself clearing plates, avoiding my eyes. I finally managed to speak, my voice tight. "Dad, we discussed that truck for the service calls I handle. Travis doesn't even do emergency work." Dad waved dismissively. "You can keep using your current truck for a while longer. Travis needs to project a professional image now that he'll be taking over more client relationships. Besides, you know how to keep that old one running. You've always been good with repairs." I watched Travis dangle the keys, not even pretending to be grateful, already talking about how he might customize the paint job. The truck that should have been mine, that I needed for my actual work, was now his latest toy. On the drive home in my rattling, aging truck, something finally broke inside me. It wasn't just about the vehicle. It was about 15 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted. It was about realizing that no matter what I contributed, I would always be the reliable workhorse while Travis would be the favored son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through job listings, something I'd never seriously considered before. I called Jack, a former colleague who'd left to work for a competitor, asking casual questions about their operation. His response shocked me. "Alex, with your skills and client relationships, you could write your own ticket anywhere in the county. Seriously, what's kept you at your dad's place all these years?" For the first time, I realized that what I thought was loyalty had actually been enabling my own mistreatment. I'd become so accustomed to being undervalued that I'd forgotten my worth. Jack mentioned their company needed an experienced technician to lead their commercial division, exactly the opportunity I'd been denied at my father's company. I spent the next week meticulously documenting everything I handled. I created detailed instructions for all our systems, client preferences, maintenance schedules, supplier relationships, and emergency protocols. I updated our customer database with notes on every major client. I wasn't going to stoop to their level by sabotaging the business, but I also wasn't going to leave them with any excuse to call me after I left. The following Monday, I arrived at the office early and placed an envelope on my father's desk. He arrived an hour later, casually late as usual. When he opened the envelope, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "2 weeks' notice? Is this some kind of joke, Alex?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. I explained my decision calmly, professionally. I mentioned the truck incident only briefly, focusing instead on the repeated broken promises about partnership and my need for professional growth. I had accepted a position with Brighton Plumbing Services. "You'll be back in a week," Dad scoffed. "They can't possibly match what we offer you here. This is just a tantrum about the truck, isn't it?" He didn't even bother to ask what they were paying me. If he had, he might have realized I would be making nearly 40% more, with benefits and a clear path to partnership within 2 years. The news spread quickly through the company. Travis cornered me in the supply room, his face flushed with panic rather than his usual smugness. "You can't just leave," he hissed. "Who's going to handle the Westside contracts, or the hospital maintenance, or the emergency calls?" For a brief moment, his confident facade cracked completely. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad's been grooming me to take over someday, but I don't know half of what you do. I never bothered to learn the systems. I'm not ready for this." The admission of inadequacy surprised me, but it wasn't my problem anymore. For years, he'd been happy to take credit while I did the work. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I replied. "After all, you've got a nice new truck to drive around in." Those 2 weeks were surprisingly liberating. I trained others on as many of my responsibilities as possible. I introduced key clients to their new technicians. I documented everything meticulously in a 3-ring binder that I labeled Essential Operations in bold marker. On my last day, I placed it on my father's desk along with my company phone, credit card, and keys to the building. Dad barely acknowledged my departure. He was still convinced I'd come crawling back within days. Mom called that evening, tearfully asking me to reconsider, saying that family businesses have ups and downs, but we needed to stick together. I gently explained that I had stuck by them for 15 years while being consistently undervalued. This wasn't a hasty decision. It was 15 years overdue. The first month at Brighton was eye-opening. My new boss, Kevin, introduced me as the best plumber in the county to clients and staff alike. My suggestions were not only heard but implemented. When I mentioned a better approach to commercial maintenance scheduling, Kevin asked me to develop it into a company-wide system and gave me resources to make it happen. Then came my first major test. Brighton had been bidding on the Lakeside Corporate Park contract for months without success. When Kevin mentioned they were making one final attempt, I realized I had crucial inside information. Wilson Family Plumbing had serviced their buildings for years, and I knew exactly what issues they'd had and what their priorities were. With that knowledge, I could virtually guarantee Brighton would win the contract. But using that information felt wrong, a betrayal of client confidentiality, even if technically I hadn't signed anything preventing it. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. Brighton had given me everything my family business wouldn't: respect, fair compensation, opportunity. I wanted to prove my value, but not by compromising my principles. The next morning, I walked into Kevin's office and explained that while I couldn't share specific details about Lakeside systems, I could help Brighton create a stronger general proposal based on my experience with similar properties. Kevin studied me for a long moment. "You know, most guys would have just used whatever advantage they had," he said finally. "Your integrity is exactly why I hired you, Alex." We won the contract anyway, on the strength of our proposal rather than inside information. That moment cemented my place at Brighton more than any easy victory could have. Most surprisingly, I finished work at reasonable hours. No more midnight calls because Travis had botched a simple job. No more working through weekends because Dad had promised impossible deadlines without consulting me. I began reconnecting with old friends, took up hiking on Saturdays, and even started dating someone who wasn't exhausted from my constant work emergencies. Meanwhile, the fallout at Wilson Family Plumbing was swift and severe. Within 2 weeks, their Yelp rating had dropped from 4.8 to 3.2 stars. Customers who had specifically requested me were furious to learn I'd left. The complex scheduling system I'd created, which no one else fully understood, began to fall apart, resulting in missed appointments and double bookings. The texts started rolling in by the third week. First from Travis, "How do I access the hospital maintenance records?" Then from Dad, "Where did you keep the warranty information for the Peterson job?" I responded with brief, professional directions to the documentation I'd left behind, but nothing more. A major crisis hit when Travis attempted to handle the quarterly maintenance at Riverside Medical Center, our largest commercial client. He forgot to shut off a main valve, causing flooding in a storage area. The hospital immediately terminated their contract, a $180,000 annual loss. That same week, 2 experienced technicians quit, citing the chaotic scheduling and lack of leadership. I later heard from Tom, one of those technicians who'd taken a job at a competitor, about what happened afterward. Travis had suffered a complete meltdown in the office, hurling tools across the workshop and screaming that he was being set up to fail. He'd accused Dad of throwing him into the deep end without proper training, of expecting him to instantly fill my shoes when he'd never been given the chance to learn. Tom described how Travis had finally collapsed onto a bench, head in his hands, muttering, "Alex made it look so easy. I never knew. I never bothered to know." Dad had apparently just stood there, ashen-faced, as the business he'd built crumbled around him. The facade of the Golden Sun was shattering under the weight of actual responsibility. The text from my family changed tone dramatically. "We need to talk" became "Please call us" became "The business is in serious trouble." Mom started calling daily, her messages increasingly desperate. Travis's fiancée, Jessica, even reached out, saying he was stressed beyond belief and barely sleeping. I maintained my distance, focusing instead on thriving in my new role. I closed 3 major commercial contracts in my first 2 months, earning a substantial bonus. With my increased salary and rational work hours, I was finally able to save enough for a down payment on a modest house. I also bought myself a new truck, not a company vehicle, but my own, paid for with the fruits of my fairly compensated labor. Word travels fast in our industry. Suppliers who worked with both companies mentioned the decline of Wilson Family Plumbing in casual conversation. "Heard your dad had to lay off 3 more guys," one mentioned while delivering parts. "Shame to see a business that's been around so long struggling like that." I maintained professional dignity, never badmouthing my family despite the temptation. After 3 months of silence between us, my father called on a Tuesday evening. His voice sounded different, older, defeated. "Alex, we need to talk. In person, the business. It's not good." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, neutral territory. When Dad and Travis arrived, the physical transformation was shocking. Dad had lost weight, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled. Travis looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, dark circles under his eyes, his typical swagger entirely absent. They laid out the dire situation. Revenue down 60%, staff reduced to just 4 employees, the bank threatening to call their business loan, 3 trucks already sold to cover expenses. The new truck Travis had been so proud of was gone too, sacrificed to keep the lights on. Dad had even mortgaged his house to inject cash into the failing business. "We made mistakes, Alex," Dad admitted, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes. I took you for granted, and now I'm paying the price." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. Travis stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. Dad pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a partnership agreement giving me 45% ownership, a substantial salary increase, and complete operational control. "Please," he whispered, "help us save what's left." The old Alex would have jumped at this opportunity, eager to finally receive the recognition I'd craved for so long. But that version of me died the day they gave away my truck. Instead, I calmly explained that I wasn't interested in returning. I had found a place where my skills were valued from day one, not after catastrophic failure forced recognition. "I'm not trying to punish you," I explained. "I just finally understand my worth. I spent 15 years trying to earn something that should have been freely given: respect, fair compensation, recognition. I won't go backward." Travis finally spoke, his voice hollow. "I didn't realize how much you were doing until you left. I thought running service calls was easy. I thought—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I thought Dad was playing favorites with you, giving you all the important work. I was wrong." I felt no satisfaction in their suffering. Instead, I offered what help I could. Names of qualified plumbers who might join their restructured business, suggestions for streamlining to survive with a smaller operation, and advice on which clients they should prioritize to rebuild their reputation. "This isn't about revenge," I told them. "I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because I deserved better." 6 months later, Wilson Family Plumbing still exists, but as a shadow of its former self. Dad has stepped back significantly, considering early retirement. Travis has been forced to learn the trade properly, handling service calls himself rather than delegating everything. They operate just 3 trucks now, focusing on residential work after losing most commercial clients. We see each other at family gatherings, awkward at first, but gradually finding a new normal. Mom finally stopped trying to guilt me into returning, especially after seeing my new house and hearing about my promotion to commercial division manager. Even Travis has developed a grudging respect, occasionally texting me technical questions which I answer without resentment. For the first time in my adult life, I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach. I'm no longer the desperately loyal son seeking approval that never came. The heaviest burden I've ever carried wasn't the physical labor of plumbing work. It was the emotional weight of trying to earn love and respect from people who took me for granted. Sometimes walking away isn't about revenge. Sometimes it's the only path to self-respect. The greatest revenge, I've learned, isn't watching others fail after you leave. It's succeeding so completely that your absence becomes the measure of your worth. Last month, Kevin mentioned he's planning to open a second location in the neighboring county and wants me to run it. In time, he says, I could buy him out and make it my own company. I find myself mentally designing the logo, planning the service area, imagining the fleet of trucks, all painted a different color than Wilson blue. Not out of spite, but because I'm finally building something that's truly mine.